The rain that night did not fall the way rain usually does. It did not whisper against rooftops or kiss the earth with gentle rhythm. Instead, it tore the sky apart like 1,000 icy blades, slicing through the air with merciless intent. Hobbs stood in front of his son's house, the weight of a small, worn suitcase dragging down one side of his body, his shirt clinging to him like a soaked skin. Behind him, the door slammed shut with a finality that echoed louder than thunder. And even though the rain howled in his ears, the words that had cut him deeper than any storm still pierced through. "You can't stay here, Dad. We have our own lives. You'll figure something out. Figure something out." The phrase gnawed at him with cruel indifference. Hobbs was 68 years old. Only a week earlier, he had been dismissed from the factory where he had given nearly 4 decades of his life. 4 decades of sweat, aching muscles, bent spine, and calloused hands. The factory had devoured his youth, his energy, his very body, and never once had it thanked him. But Hobbs had endured it, because with those same battered hands he had raised a boy, fed him when food was scarce, clothed him even when Hobbs himself went without. And now, that boy, his son, had cast him into the storm like refuse too worn to be useful. He was nothing more than a discarded rag. That first night he wandered through the downpour, until at last he rented a damp, cramped room above a greasy fry shop. The stink of rancid oil crept into everything, his clothes, his skin, even his dreams. The radiator hissed and rattled as if mocking him, never once pushing back the cold that seeped into his bones. The nights stretched endless, hollow. No laughter of grandchildren running down hallways, no clinking of mugs in the kitchen, only the faint, lonely hum of a cheap refrigerator. In 6 months, his son called him only twice. And when he did, his tone was clipped and cold, as though Hobbs were nothing more than a bothersome neighbor rather than the man who had once carried him on his shoulders and kissed away his fevers. Then one morning, an envelope appeared, cream-colored, heavy, with his name inked in sharp, black letters. Hobbs held it with shaking hands, not knowing if it would be salvation or another burden. Inside, the lawyer's words stunned him. Eduardo, a distant cousin he had not seen since the late 1970s, had died. Against all reason, against all expectation, Eduardo had left Hobbs everything: an estate in Kent, sprawling and serene, and a bank account that could pay his rent for 3 decades without denting itself. Hobbs read the letter twice. He placed it gently on the warped table in his rented room. For the first time in months, he did not feel the gnaw of cold, though he told no one. Not yet. 2 weeks later, the doorbell to his rented room buzzed. Hobbs opened it to see his son, his daughter-in-law, and the children. They smiled as though nothing had ever gone wrong, as though they were old comrades reunited after years apart. His son embraced him with a warmth that had been absent since the night of the storm. "Dad," he said, "we just wanted to see how you were doing." The kettle had only begun to hiss when his son let the mask slip. "We heard something," he said, feigning nonchalance. "Something about a lawyer's letter." Hobbs tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "And who told you that?" His son shrugged quickly, dismissing the question. "Doesn't matter. What matters is maybe you could come live with us again. We could help you manage things." Manage things. Hobbs let the words sit in the air like poison. They meant control. They meant circling vultures dressed as family. He nodded, said little. When the inheritance was legally his, he extended an invitation, not to his damp room, but to a tavern, the very one where he and his late wife had once celebrated anniversaries. Hobbs reserved the largest table, not just for family, but for witnesses. The meal was plentiful, the laughter practiced. Yet beneath the surface, impatience brewed. His son drummed his fork against his plate, eyes darting toward Hobbs, waiting for the announcement. At last, he leaned forward, voice thick with anticipation. "So, Dad, what's the plan?" Hobbs set his knife gently on the table and lifted his gaze. He did not glance over his son as one might look at a stranger. He studied him, truly studied him. He saw not only the grown man sitting across, but also the fevered boy whose brow he had once cooled with a damp cloth, the child he had chased behind a wobbling bicycle until Hobbs himself had nearly collapsed. "My plan," Hobbs said slowly, is to buy a little cottage by the sea in Bitstable. A place quiet and mine alone. His son blinked, disbelieving. Bitstable? That's hours away. We'd hardly see each other. I thought you'd come back home. You thought wrong, Hobbs replied, leaning back. When I lost everything, you cast me into the storm without a second glance. I was a burden then. Now, because I have something, suddenly I'm family again. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Even his daughter-in-law paused mid-bite, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Dad, that's not fair, his son stammered. Hobbs's hand slammed against the table, the glasses ringing like bells. Not fair? Not fair is watching me leave with nothing but a suitcase and not once looking back. Not fair is forgetting the blood and years I gave so you could grow, so you could live better than I did. You turned away from your own blood. And now you come, not for me, but for what's mine. Well, hear me now, never. He rose from his seat, the dessert untouched, the tavern's warmth abandoned. Outside, the night air was icy, but it was pure, and for the first time in years Hobbs filled his lungs without choking. A month later, he moved into his new home by the sea. White walls welcomed him. A garden bloomed with roses. The ocean whispered against the shore as if singing just for him. The house became more than shelter, it became freedom. He filled it with old photographs, with books that smelled of his youth, with the aroma of freshly baked bread that replaced the stench of rancid oil. Sometimes his son called. The tone was softer now, tinged with something that could have been guilt, or perhaps greed. Hobbs did not know, and he no longer cared. What mattered was this. He would never again allow anyone, sun, stranger, or storm, to make him feel disposable. And so, when he sat by the window, a cup of tea warming his palms, watching the sun dip into the endless horizon, Hobbs smiled. Because what he had inherited was not simply wealth. It was liberty. It was dignity. It was the right, finally, to choose his own life. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales. Your support helps bring more stories like Hobbs's journey to life.